Hi everyone, I'm Doug from DigiPen in Redmond. In this video, we'll learn more about conditions and how to use the AND, OR, and NOT blocks. Let's talk about conditions. Here's a quick refresher in case you've forgotten what we mean by that. A condition is a statement that can only be either true or false. For example, the sky is blue is a condition that is true. Cows have 8 legs is a condition that is false. We've already been using conditions with if-then blocks in Scratch, but we can also combine them in different ways. Combining conditions is a part of what is called Boolean Logic, named after English mathematician George Boole. This is what we will focus on now. Imagine we're designing a video game where the player is trapped in a maze where they must fight monsters, and they have to find and open the door to the exit. In order to open the door, the player needs to find a key and also defeat the boss monster. To do this in Scratch, we'll make a variable called foundKey and another called defeatedBoss. When the player finds the key, we set foundKey to true. When they defeat the boss, we set defeatedBoss to true. Then, later, we'll use an if-then block to check whether both variables equal true. If they do, the door opens. We need to check whether the player has the key and the boss has been defeated. How do we check them both? Scratch has a block for this, the AND block. It has 2 condition slots. If the left slot is true and the right slot is true, then the AND block itself is true. If either slot is false, then the AND block is false. We could check whether foundKey equals true in one slot and whether defeatedBoss is true in the other. Let's look at how this would work. Imagine the player reaches the door, but they have neither found the key nor defeated the boss. This means foundKey equals false and defeatedBoss also equals false. The AND block looks at the 2 slots, and since they're both false, it's also false. The door does not open. What if the player didn't find the key, but they did defeat the boss? Or what if they did find the key, but didn't beat the boss? In both of these cases, the AND block looks at its slots, and it sees that one of them is false. It doesn't matter if the other slot is true. The AND block is now false, and the door doesn't open. The door will only open if both slots are true, so the player has to find the key and defeat the boss. Now let's say we change the design of the game so that the player can now open the door if they've found the key or defeated the boss. In other words, only one of these conditions needs to be true for the door to open. Scratch has this covered too, with the OR block. Like the AND block, it has 2 condition slots, but, unlike AND, OR is true if either one of them is true. Both slots have to be false in order for the OR block to be false. Let's see how this would work in the game. Imagine the player reaches the door without the key and they haven't beaten the boss. This means the foundKey and defeatedBoss variables are both false. The OR block checks both of its slots, and it sees that both are false, so it is also false. The door does not open. Now imagine they don't have the key, but they did defeat the boss, or they do have the key but didn't beat the boss. The OR block sees that one of the 2 slots is true, so it doesn't matter what the other slot is. The OR block itself is true, and the door opens. And, of course, if they both have the key and have defeated the boss, then naturally the OR block is true, and the door opens. We're not quite done yet. Now we have decided to add a new element to the game. The boss monster can curse the player. We'll introduce another variable, isCursed, which gets set to true if the player is cursed. If the player reaches the door while they're cursed, it will not open, even if they've found the key or beaten the boss. In Scratch, we'll have to check whether the player is not cursed. Of course, there's a block for that, the not block. Unlike the and or blocks, not only has one condition slot. If its slot is true, the not block is false. If its slot is false, the not block is true. To use this together with the other blocks, we'll have to get a little fancy. We want to check if the player has the key or they've beaten the boss, and they are not cursed. To do this correctly, we'll have to put the OR block inside one of the slots in the AND block, together with the conditions in its condition slots. In the AND block's other slot, we'll put the NOT block and its condition. Now the if-then block's condition is complete. There are so many different ways that conditions can be combined. Let's do a little exercise to explore some of them in Scratch with the help of the default cat sprite. Visit the link in the description below and then click the See Inside button. Here's how this exercise works. We'll tell you a set of conditions that need to be met in order for the cat to move, or, in some cases, in order for it to stop moving. Your task will be to assemble the condition using the blocks available to you. So, for example, we might say something like, if the Z key is pressed, then the cat moves. Then, you would put a key pressed block with the Z key selected in the condition slot of the if-then block. Then you would click the green flag and check your answer by holding the Z key. If the cat moves, you got it right. Ready? Let's go. If the X key is pressed, then the cat moves. How do you make this happen? This one is pretty easy. You just put a key pressed block with the X key selected in the condition slot. Here's the next one. If the Z key is pressed and the X key is pressed, then the cat moves. How do you make this happen? Here, you'll need an AND block. Put a key pressed block in each of its slots, one with the Z key selected and the other with the X key selected. Then put the whole thing in the condition slot. Here's the next one. If the Z key is pressed, then the cat stops. How do you make this happen? Here's a hint. If the cat stops when the Z key is pressed, then what happens when the Z key is not pressed? For this one, you need a NOT block. Put a key pressed block with the Z key selected inside it and put that in the condition slot. Let's try the next one. If the Z key is pressed and the X key is not pressed, then the cat moves. How do you make this happen? You'll need an AND block again, as well as a NOT block. Put a key pressed block with Z selected in one of the slots of the AND block, and put a NOT block inside the other slot. Then put a key pressed block with X selected in the slot of the NOT block. Here's the next one. If either the Z key or the X key is pressed, then the cat stops. How do you make this happen? Here's a hint. First, try making the cat move if either of those keys is pressed, and then see if you can figure out how to make it stop instead of move. There are actually two ways of doing this one. The first way is this. Start with an OR block with a key pressed block in each of its slots, one set to Z and the other set to X. Then, put the OR block inside a NOT block and put that whole thing in the condition slot. This way, the cat will only move if neither of those keys is pressed. The other way is a little more complicated. It uses an AND block and two NOT blocks. Here's how it works. Put a NOT block in each slot of the AND block, and then put the two key-pressed blocks inside the NOT blocks. Then put this whole thing in the condition slot. This works the same way. In Boolean logic, when two conditions work exactly the same way, we say that they are logically equivalent. Feel free to play around with this exercise. What kinds of complicated combinations of conditions can you concoct? Let's recap what we've learned in this video. First, we got a refresher on what conditions are. Statements that can only be either true or false. We learned that conditions can be combined in many different ways to produce other conditions, and that combining them is a part of what is called Boolean logic. Next, we learned about the AND and OR blocks, each of which has two condition slots. The AND block is only true if both conditions in its slots are true, but the OR block is true if either one of its conditions is true. Then we learned about the NOT block, which has one condition slot, and it is true when its condition is false, and false when its condition is true. Finally, we played around with an exercise in Scratch to explore the different ways that conditions can be combined and used in gameplay programming. In the next video, we'll go back to Scratch Invaders, where we'll learn a more powerful and sophisticated way of making the hero shoot.